why y'all up so early? What the hell? Can't believe these mofos is up right now. You should be dreaming and snoozing, but you up and you cruising, man. Is you waxing for a bruising? Nah, listen, I'm just choosing a different kind of path, a different kind of math. I'm on a different Ave, yeah, and you stuck on the boulevard. You should be dreaming and snoozing, but you up cruising. Oh, you should be dreaming and snoozing, but you up cruising. You should be dreaming and snoozing. They say the early bird catch the worm, yeah. In the 90s had to catch a perm, yeah. To keep my fucking hair straight, man. No, oh, I can't catch a flow this morning. Yo, this beat is too sweet. Started back from the top. Alright, you can probably start to see the difference in the second layer of paint. So this hand and arm has 2 layers of paint. You can see the difference in how this arm looks, especially from his face. So you can see the tones come out more in his face and his arm than in this arm. So I'm gonna start putting a second layer of paint right here. They say it looks so divine, I painted 2 times. They say it looks so nice because I'm nice. Nice. Oh, I'm really feeling this beat, man. I'm really feeling my feet. Yeah, gotta agitate the gravel. It don't really matter if you made automatic, cause we all start dust with a conscience. Yeah, so I come through and I just bomb shit. And I try to put a fucking end to this nonsense. I ain't on a contest, man, it's a conquest. Yo, just listen, man, I'm too blessed. My hands got them skills, so I put it to the test. And it's some real talent, man. I must confess that I am the best on the best. Cause every time I touch a brush, ayy, I make these haters shut up, ayy. Cause I do something beautiful, feel it from my follicles down to my cuticles, ayy. Can't do the same shit, bruh. I'm on a different plane with, yeah. And I ain't claim to be the best, and I ain't gotta say it, I just feel it in my chest. Everybody looking funny cause I'm iller than the rest, and they ain't wanna admit it, so I put that shit to rest. Y'all ain't want me to bust these early morning freestyles. I don't think I heard this beat yet. Super slow shit. Hey. How's the lighting for you guys? Is this looking alright?
It only takes a moment to listen, but it can take a lifetime to understand. Stand.
Okay.
I got up and my stomach was hurting. Was that music you were playing before?
Talking about my homie beats. Yeah, that last beat, yeah.
Does he ever put lyrics on there?
No, he's just a composer. I think he plays the guitar. I think some on most of these beats he's probably playing the guitar and the piano. And he said he wrote some songs before, but I've never heard his voice on the track. Faking bits. Good morning.
That's my pain in your sweats.
And yeah, to do at the beach. That's my homie who I'm going to see for his dinner.
Oh, for the wedding.
Yeah.
I think I have it.
Did you pay attention to McKenna's theory about the evolution of the human brain, the stoned ape theory? That
Yeah, I looked at it, but I didn't find it persuasive. And in fact, if you press Terence McKenna, he didn't find it entirely persuasive. It's an interesting speculation. It's kind of a mind game. I can see how psychedelics would influence the mind and create new ideas, new memes, and might contribute to language. But how does it get into the genes? That's what
the genes.
The genes, because he said it changed us at the genetic level. I see psychedelics as having had a profound effect at the level of cultural evolution, that there are lots of interesting innovations that people who had psychedelic experience introduced to our culture. We talked about religion earlier. That could be one. I had a wonderful interview with Stuart Brand, the founder of the Whole Earth Catalog, and his insight, he had this profound insight during a psychedelic trip on the roof of his house in North Beach, and he saw the curvature of the earth in a way he hadn't before. And he said, God, if we could have a photo, this is 1966, we had never seen a picture of the earth from space.
I do have to go to work.
And he said, if we had a picture of the earth from space and we could see it as this round spaceship, that would change everything, because if you think of the earth as flat, as most of us instinctively do, it's endless. There's endless resources. You don't have to worry about limits in any way. But if we had that image, and you realize, I have to start a campaign to get NASA to turn the cameras around. They're on their way to the moon. Show us the earth from space. And he said, I'm going to make a campaign. I know. And he says, this is on LSD. I'll make a button. Very important medium in 1966. I'll make a button. And what should the button say? It should be a little paranoid to get people's attention. Why haven't they shown us an image of the Earth from space? Yeah, that's what he would do. And he started a campaign. He started selling these buttons. And the campaign got in the newspapers, and it goes viral, as viral as you could get in 1966.
I got to work with
2 years
kids
later,
today.
NASA produced that image, and he put it on the Whole Earth Catalog, and that image galvanized the environmental movement. So it's those kind of memes that psychedelics introduces into culture, and that changes culture. That image changed culture. And I think there are hundreds of them. I mean, Steve Jobs talked about, his use of LSD is very important to his formative experience. And in fact, there's a whole tradition of computer engineers going back to the 50s using LSD that I wrote about in the book. So, but I don't see how we were selected genetically because of there was an advantage to the people who were taking a lot of psychedelics. That's where he loses
necessarily his.
Maybe I'm misrepresenting it.
His theory is that it coincides with climate change and these lower hominids experimenting with different food sources. So as the rainforest receded into grasslands, they started experimenting by flipping over cow patties and finding grubs and perhaps even mushrooms that were growing on these cow patties. And his theory was that there's a bunch of different benefits. One, low doses of psilocybin have been shown to increase visual acuity.
And it's given to hunting dogs in certain cultures.
Yes. Yeah. Make you a better hunter, make you more in tune with what you're doing. That it would make you more, central nervous system arousal, including sexual arousal, make you more horny, which would make you,
more productive,
procreate more often. And that the very unusual effect that psilocybin has on the mind could have led to language and could have also led to the expansion of neurons.
The language could be part of cultural evolution.
Sure.
Yeah.
The doubling of the human brain size, though, was the particular thing. That it coincided, according to McKenna, there's a lot of people that disagree with him. But his brother makes a very compelling case for it. His brother Dennis, who's still alive.
Yeah.
And he's a brilliant, brilliant guy. Yeah. He talked about it on this podcast. He talked about his take on the stoned ape theory scientifically, why he believes it's really what happened. But that it does coincide with the change in climate of these ape-like people trying out different things, and that the doubling of the human brain size over a period of 2 million years is like one of the greatest mysteries in the entire fossil record.
Yeah, but there are alternative theories. I mean, I wrote about one in my last book.
All coincide.
Maybe cooking with fire can explain the increase in the brain size because you get more nutritional value from cooked food than raw food.
The throwing arm, the desire to hunt all these different animals, and the calculating all these different ways to do that, and communication.
Right.
I think there's probably a bunch of coinciding factors.
Yeah, and it may well be that people were eating everything, right? Our ancestors, it's amazing what they ate, and no doubt they ate psychedelic mushrooms, and no doubt, I mean, he also believed that language was a form of synesthesia, in the way that synesthesia, you can smell a musical note or something like that you're taking a sound, a meaningless sound, and you're attaching it to a concept that maybe that happened on psilocybin. But
he had a bunch of ideas that never panned out.
he was an incredibly creative person, and and they're all really interesting to think about. Some of them I think you can probably discredit based on what we understand about genes and evolution, but others are just really provocative.
Well, that's where his brother comes in.
Yeah,
his brother's a
scientist. Yeah.
Strict scientist.
Right.
He doesn't tolerate any of the woo-woo, and
he's skeptical of some of his brother's ideas.
Oh yeah,
too.
openly. Yeah. I mean, loved his brother, but he was like, there's a lot of things that weren't really accurate.
But also Terence McKenna too would say, well, I'm just putting these ideas out there.
Well, the guy was a constant pot user. He was constantly doing psychedelics and
brilliant talker. He would have a podcast now, right?
Oh, for sure.
It would be amazing.
Yeah, for sure. I'd promote the shit out of it.
I would too.
Yeah, I mean, he was a fun guy to listen to talk. And there's a podcast called The Psychedelic Salon that my friend Lorenzo hosts that has pretty much every Terence McKenna lecture and speech he's ever done available for free. You can download it. And Lorenzo has taken these and digitally remastered them so the sound is better. And it's really awesome that he's got this resource. But the idea that these lower hominids experimented with psilocybin, and this was what advanced culture, advanced language, advanced their understanding of each other. It's a very, very compelling idea.
Yeah, it is. And I think, the way I think about drugs like psychedelics in evolution, in the same way like in genetic evolution, radiation causes mutations. And some of those mutations turn out to be really valuable. Purely by accident, some great new trait is introduced to the species, and it increases fitness, and that person or that individual lives on. In the cultural realm, psychedelics are like radiation. They're mutagens. They create change, variation, and that advances cultural evolution. All that variation, all those wild ideas, 99% of them are stupid and useless, I'll bet. But that 1% can change the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
I forgot who wrote it, but I haven't read it.
I was supposed to read it.
Yeah.
School, but I never did.
It's about a black dude, I think, Invisible Man.
More than just the business he came for.
Who
I know this guy is
whether that's taking in every moment, or capturing a moment, worth bringing.
no commercials.
Possibility.
Shit.
That's annoying. Like YouTube views, I don't even know what
I might have to get a YouTube subscription just so I don't have to
But
fucking.
like, it's their fault. They got mad at the ads playing, but you guys are providing the ads. You guys, they're promoting, so like, why can't they just let the video automatically play with it? It's weird. Ooh, the scroll on the back of the book. That's good. See, like, I can see you painting something like this. You know, with like body paint, and then you have your costume stuff. Like,
DL with Invisible Man by Rock. What's the deal, yo? This week we keeping it on a DL with Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Now when the narrator of this book starts off saying he invisible, it ain't because he got superpowers. It's because whenever people look at him, they only see their surroundings, themselves, and their imagination. So this cat started reminiscing about back in the day when his young self got the honor of making a speech in front of some white folk. But before he do, the Invisible Man got to throw down with some brothers and make a damn fool of himself as entertainment. When it's all said and done, these crazy crackers throw him some change for his education. In college, the narrator got to drive around a rich honky named Norton. But after showing him how black folks really live, the Invisible Man gets expelled and ends up grinding at a factory in New York. It's all good till one day goes hyphy at work and the narrator blacks the out. Then the Invisible Man hits the streets of Harlem where he shacks up with some soul sister named Mary, who heals his wounds and learns some good on his black heritage. After the Invisible Man heal up, some fools called the Brotherhood ask if he want to join an organization to help the oppressed. The price? He kissed his name and his past goodbye. When Clifton, one of his Brotherhood boys, disappears, our boy goes looking for him. But soon after, sees him gets capped by the 5-0. Rodney King! Preach! So the narrator pours one out for Clifton during his funeral. But the Brotherhood start tweaking about him doing it without their say-so. Gets real when some thug named Ross the Destroyer sparks a riot up in Harlem. This fool throws a goddamn spear at the Invisible Man. How the you got a spear in Harlem? But our boy ducks it, picks it back up, and slings it right in his grill. Then Invisi fall into a sewer hole where the police trap him, and he been chilling underground ever since. Yo, hold up for a second and check me out, shorty. If your cell phone company trying to play you with all them hidden fees, then roll over to Ting.com, because they got the whole service provider game sold up. This ain't no James Joyce, son. Ting.com is mobile that actually makes sense. And if you think I'm frontin', just check that savings calculator and you'll see when it comes to fast money, it don't get no realer than Ting. Show some love, baby, because Ting.com is going hard for the hood and helping keep this play off the streets and in the library. Throughout this novel, Invisible Man's main game is finding the true identity in a world full of phonies trying to tell him who he be. Whether it's Emerson, Norton, or Jack from the Brotherhood, they were very much the same, each attempting to force his picture of reality upon me, and neither giving a hoot in hell for how things looked to me. I was simply a material, a natural resource to be used. But only by defining himself can the Invisible Man really break them chains and be free. So our boy tried to find a gang of other players who fight in the same power. But even the Brotherhood scheming to use the narrator for their own purposes. They say they're a gang of liberators, but on the real, they're really just a bunch of oppressors. The Invisible Man trying to find out who he is, but these haters playing it raw and tell him to forget his name and past. Now how's a brother gonna cope with all these haters rolling fake? He gotta look at life with a new sense of awareness. Even though Invisible Man dealing with some real street shit, he learns to look at life through a comic frame. Like his grandpappy said, laugh to keep from crying. Every single time this thug tried to change his life in order to stop being run, it ends up so far from what he intended that it seems straight up absurd. For example, his speech at the beginning don't give him no respect, but it does give him a mouthful of blood. When it's all said and done, the Invisible Man finally gets exactly what he's chasing. Wading through all that absurd bullshit helps him find out who he truly is. Like my main man Camus once said, the absurd then is that kind of man who wills to discover or to impose meaning upon an existence for which he has been able to determine no real purpose. In the end, our boy throws all these fake haters to the wind and say he don't need them to find his own identity. So he buries himself underground, picks up a pen, and defines himself through spitting his story. That's some heroic shit right there. So define yourself by picking up some of my swag. Tune in next week and get your ass educated. Later.
Yeah. I fuck with smart thugs.
Yeah.
Keeping this thug in the library and off the streets.
There's some guy that posts his I don't know if they're YouTube videos or whatever, but he is like a thug, whatever. He used to be a thug, but now he's a second grade or kindergarten teacher. And like he'd be making like videos that relate about teachers and like, you know how they get mad about like breaks or something. But like he'd be putting like the same emphasis.
The Atheist Debates Patreon Project presents a discussion about hell. And you can laugh. It's all right. I just got my intro recorded and didn't have to do any work. So we get lots of email from the TV show. I was a fundamentalist Christian for more than 25 years, was intended to be a pastor. Those plans backfired. I'll talk about that at another time. And now I'm an atheist, a humanist, skeptic, secularist, a non-theist. Pick a label. Most of them probably apply to me in some context. And I've been hosting the TV show for 12 years, and we get lots and or 11 years. We get lots of email. One of the most common complaints or concerns that I get from both atheists and believers is this notion of hell. I have met people who have been atheists for 50 years or more who still wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares about the hell that they were indoctrinated to believe in as a child. They have in their day-to-day life, when they're going about, going to the grocery store or everything else, these thoughts don't enter their head. They don't think it's real. But every now and then there's this nagging sensation, or they'll wake up in the middle of the night with this nightmarish vision of hell. And I've also heard from people who are believers, and they'll say really strange things like, I'd really like to stop believing, but this hell thing just keeps grasping hold of me. And that's a really curious statement to me because, first of all, I don't think beliefs are a choice. You're either convinced of something or you're not. And so what these people are telling me is, I really don't believe this stuff, but I'm absolutely terrified of what will happen as soon as I say I don't believe in this stuff. And it's because they've been fed this idea of hell. And what they're really, in this case, doing is something that Dan Dennis talked about, which is belief in belief. It's not so much a belief in the God or a belief in the doctrine. They just believe that there's value in this belief, or at least value in professing this belief. And it gets right back to things that we've talked about before, like Pascal's wager, which is really just fake it till you make it. The perfect or the formal original version of Pascal's wager wasn't really, hey, this is the best bet. It was, this is the best bet, and even if you can't make yourself believe this, you should act as if you do in the hopes that you will delude yourself into actually believing it. That's what Pascal was actually talking about. And the hell concept comes up over and over with this. Religions, and today we're probably primarily going to be talking about Christianity with hell, but we might delve into some other religions as well. But it's been said before that they poison you and then offer you the cure. They tell you that you're broken and sinful and you're damned to hell, but we can help you get out of this, or our particular doctrine or our supernatural super guy can help you get out of this. It's worse than that, because they don't actually poison you. They just convince you that you're poisoned, and then they offer you the homeopathic remedy. There's no there. And throughout the history of Christianity, the concept of hell has been debated and seriously disagreed about, to the point that there are a reason why there are more than 1,000 denominations that all identify as Christian, and they agree and disagree on every single point of doctrine, and hell is a big one. If what I've been told is correct, Fred Phelps, who is deceased but used to run the Westboro Baptist Church, went to the same Bible school as Billy Graham. Now, Fred believed in an actual literal hell, and Billy Graham believed in, or believes in, is he dead yet? Sorry. Annihilation theory, the idea that hell is eternal separation from God. So what exactly we're talking about when we're talking about hell? Well, the first concept, which you're going to find in the more liberal, nice churches, is this idea that hell is annihilation, that all the people who believe and meet whatever criteria that God has established, they get to go on to heaven, to paradise, to some happy place, and everybody who doesn't meet that criteria just stops existing. So we're kind of already at least in agreement that we're likely to just cease to exist. But there's another version of this where hell is not necessarily a literal place of torture and torment, it's just separation from God. And there are people who say, oh, I don't believe in the fire and brimstone and the torment and the torture that everybody thinks of when they think of hell. Hell is just eternal separation from God. And that sounds so much better. I'm actually in favor of that sort of eternity based on the God that they're advocating. The problem, though, is that the God they think they're advocating is a God of love and peace. And so they're talking about a separation from love and peace, which is, by the way, torment. Now, I've argued before that what some people would consider to be an eternity in heaven might be hellish for me. I'm not sure that I buy into this idea that I was raised with about what goes on in heaven and what should go on in heaven. It makes no sense to me. And I've argued before, for example, my mother is a fundamentalist, committed Christian who loves me dearly and thinks I work for Satan and I'm leading people to hell. And she also believes that she's going to go to heaven. And she's absolutely wrong. Even if she's right about there being a God in heaven, she's not going. Because she believes there's no sorrow in heaven. And there's no way that my mother could be in heaven with me in hell and not be sorry. Which means whatever ends up in heaven isn't my mother, it's some doppelganger of my mother that has been stripped of all the things that make her her. It's one of the best arguments for the non-existence of anybody in hell that I've ever come up with or heard about. And similarly, when we talk about hell, if I'm annihilated, okay, fine. I can't do anything about that. By the way, I can't do anything, seemingly, about any of these options. I can't do anything to convince this God that perhaps he's an immoral thug, or perhaps his criteria for who gets to go to happy land and who doesn't might be wrong. I'm just supposed to take it as it is. Now, the biblical tradition, you will have the people who are arguing on behalf of eternal separation or annihilation saying, the Bible doesn't really say anything about hell. And they're kind of right. Most of the things that we think of when we think of hell, all the visions that come to your head about liars being held up by their tongues and pitchforks and some elements of lake of fire are in there, and I'll get to that in a minute. Most of that actually comes from a book that's not in the Bible, the Apocalypse of Peter, which is my favorite book that should be in the Bible that's not. It was considered scripturally authoritative. Just like any other book, it just wasn't popular enough. People didn't like reading from it. They didn't like reading that, you know, if you were a liar, that you were going to be hung up by your tongue, or that homosexuals would have to climb up to this tall mountain and jump off onto all the bodies of all the other gay people who were down there, and then they would gradually get smushed to the bottom where they would climb back out and climb up the hill and do this over and over again for eternity. This doesn't sound like any sort of punishment that a reasonable person would come up with. This seems to be something along the lines of, we don't like these people, so let's submit some really wacky crap and just stick it in a book and terrify them. We need to terrify people. In Matthew 25, around verse 41 or so, Jesus is talking, and it's a depart from me, you cursed, I was hungry and you didn't feed me, and all this other stuff, and into the lake of fire with you, the lake of fire that was created for the devil and his angels. That is as close as the Bible ever gets to describing a literal hell. This passage about the lake of fire that's for the devil, all of you who are cursed, it doesn't really go through and explain who is or isn't cursed and how you're going to get there. Clearly, if somebody's hungry, you better feed them, because that one is expressly in there as the one of the things that will make you cursed to the lake of fire. It also talks about selling your belongings and giving your money to the poor. I think if we drive by pretty much any megachurch, we know that's not happening. There's lots of these wonderful old churches with great architecture that I really love, and I just wish they were all like homeless shelters, because we need to put them to some good use. In Luke 16, there's the parable about the poor man and the rich man, and it describes the poor man after he's dead lying in the bosom of Abraham. And this is because there's not much discussion or agreement about an afterlife, or if there is an afterlife, because the Old Testament tends to refer to people dying and going off to sleep with their fathers. And it doesn't actually talk about what happens. So there's not stringent ideas about an afterlife within Judaism. As we get to New Testament, and by the way, in the Old Testament, you'll have Sheol, which is Hades, which could literally be translated as just the grave. Doesn't tell you what kind of grave you've got, whether you've got the fancy-ass casket with a light and internet access, or whether you just got, dumped in a sack in the river. It's all the grave. In the New Testament, you get a few other terms that are used, and there's a lot of argument. Is Gehenna just referring to this place where we buried the dead after war, or is it referring to a literal hell? And you have the poor man lying in the bosom of Abraham, and he's looking down on the rich man who is suffering and being tormented. And those two passages, and perhaps a couple others, are about all you can do to interpret the sort of literal hell that people generally think of and associate with Christianity. I was a Southern Baptist for more than 25 years. I don't know exactly what we were taught on hell, but I know what my visions of hell were based on the sermons. And they don't exist in the verses, by and large. It's this vague, you better do what you're supposed to do, or into the lake of fire with you. So the Apocalypse of Peter then gets picked up and becomes popular and then vanishes, or popular in the sense that it's agreed upon. It was unpopular to preach from it, because who likes this? This is why nobody likes the fire and brimstone sermons. They want to, it's happy love, turn the other cheek, do unto others, and all this stuff. And you don't hear about this stuff because that doesn't get you money, I think, is probably one of the reasons. But this Apocalypse of Peter vanished. We didn't have any copies. It was lost for a long time. But the ideas from it survived and became Dante's Inferno. The bulk of what's described in there is taken right out of the descriptions in Apocalypse of Peter. So the thoughts about hell stayed in the culture, even though they weren't actually included in the book. And they exist to this day. Horns and a pitchfork, I mean, those are things that were added much later that don't have anything to do with the Apocalypse of Peter or anything else. But we started to imagine, what do these demons look like? What do these devils look like? Despite the fact that the Bible would describe them as beautiful, would describe Lucifer as the most beautiful, we tend to go for this evil, dark, pointy beard, which mine used to be, but now it's gray. Horns, which I don't have, but I will put on at Halloween, and a pitchfork, which is on my back porch. So, because while my parents think I'm working for Satan, my wife's grandparents think I am Satan. And I have to remind them that I don't seem to be reaping the rewards of being an immortal superpower. So there's this constant threat from the church. And it's only vaguely biblical, which is okay. Because when you take a look at what most believers, particularly Christians, believe, they don't know what they believe. They don't know why they believe. They don't know what's in their Bible. If they did, they'd be atheists, or at least non-Christians. This is a social exercise, which we're engaged in right now, and I fully support. Churches have co-opted the humanity that we all have and claimed it as their own. And I love seeing that, UUs and Sunday Assembly and Oasis and free thought groups and stuff like that are recapturing that to give people a place to meet. So they exploit the fears that we already have, the fears of loneliness, the fears of nobody cares about me, the fear of what happens after I'm dead, what's it like to be dead. And then they actually manufacture and invent new fears to exploit as well. This terrible fear that after you're dead, it's not over. Somebody's going to keep sticking it to you because you didn't fit some perfect mold, or you didn't buy into this particular idea. It is entirely a logical fallacy, argumentum ad baculum. The argument from the sword or from the stick. It's a threat. You better believe or else. As I mentioned earlier, it's the foundation behind Pascal's wager. And it takes the things that make us most human, that are real, and tries to say, this is wrong. You'll never be able to fix this on your own. We can help you fix it, or we can at least provide a loophole. Because within Christianity, you have this idea that God took human form, in some sense, and sacrificed himself to serve as a loophole for rules that he's in charge of. He desperately wants to forgive humanity, but he can't forgive humanity until he first kills himself in some bloody sacrifice for a weekend. At least when Elvis died for my sins, he stayed dead. So it develops this anxiety. I've talked before about when I was a Southern Baptist, there's kind of a guilt cycle going on. You're never going to live up to the ideals of the perfect walk and present and relationship with Jesus. And so as you slip away and make mistakes, they pull you back in and you feel guilty, and then you rededicate your life. I can't count how many times I rededicated my life to Christ, even as a teenager. And it was every Sunday. When there was an altar call, it was for the lost people to come up and accept Jesus so they could go to heaven and not hell. And it was also for all of the rest of us who were normal but happened to believe, but maybe you'd had a drink or thought about sex, or maybe heaven forbid, you actually had sex outside of marriage, you were struggling with some secret sin, or maybe you just hadn't been a good enough Christian, that was the time for you to come down and rededicate your life to Christ, which I am pretty sure there are some people who do that every Sunday. Which just exposes the reality that the things that they're opposed to, the things that they want to label as bad and evil that are going to get you sent to hell, are the core of who we are. Now, that doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with anything. I am a firm believer in honesty, and justice, and equality, and I fully understand that people can be mean and cruel, and those are bad things that we should discourage, but I'm not convinced that telling them that they're going to be roasted for eternity is a particularly effective method. Religions have two primary goals. Keep the religion alive by bringing in more people and more money so they can maintain the de facto privileged status that religions have almost everywhere in the world. If you want to become a nonprofit organization, all you have to do is say, we're a Baptist church, we're a Catholic church, we're this church. And it's automatic because the government has already decided this is a legitimate church. Well, they just decided that Pastafarianism isn't a legitimate church. I pretty much agree with them because it's a satire and it's there to expose this. But what it does is it puts the government in the position of declaring which churches are real and which isn't, which as far as I'm concerned is a clear violation of the First Amendment because the government is now entangled in deciding which religions are legitimate and which ones aren't. And they want to keep this status of having the privileged position of not having to pay taxes, not having to pay property taxes. And we can have a tax discussion later because I want to get back to hell. But the truth is, while they're trying to do all this, religions are failing and dying. Church attendance is on the decline. The nuns, the NONEs, those who ascribe to no religion, they're probably the fastest growing religious identity in the United States currently. There are other religions that are growing faster in different areas. But by and large, reason and reality and secularism are winning out. It's just taken too damn long. And so some of us are desperate to speed that up. So the anxiety exists and the fear of punishment exists, whether you're talking about a lake of fire or separation from love and peace and God, or even an...
So, I'm almost at an hour. I'm about to get out of here, guys. But what do you think a godless society would look like? If secularism is on the rise and more people are leaving the church and they're not believing the bullshit in the Bible anymore, and they're not, he said nuns. I don't claim any religion. I'm not claiming a religion. None. You know what I'm saying? Or new age spiritual, but I don't believe in this and that, dude. If that is the more popular trend right now, and it continues to gain momentum and more people do decide to leave organized religion and start to outnumber Orthodox and mainstream religions, what would that do to our society? Would that have a bad effect, or would things not change much? Yo, what up? All right, I think I'm gonna stop right there. Mhm. All right. Do I paint for a living? Partially. It is a great subsidiary to my fucking job. I swear. Is without my art, I have to work a part-time job somewhere else or some shit like that. But I, I'm trying to make it my full-time career, bro. I took a whole year off of work and just tried to fucking push this shit hard as hell. Yo, you need more than a year, bro. That's why most really well-known artists went to college. And it's weird, like, people tell you not to get an art degree, but if you that shit and you can be that one dude at your university in the art class, and your university pushes you and gives you a residency set up where they will pay you to create art, you know, and then you can get apprenticeships and all that shit. Like it's easier if you do have those early years where you that's all you do is just paint for years. Like you need a couple of years to do that shit. So me trying to do as much as I can in 1 year, I'm not gonna regret taking that year off of work. You know what I'm saying? I fucking produced a lot of art. I made a lot of connections. I fucking did a lot of shows. Um, but I need more time than just 1 year. So I got a pretty decent job right now, and they're real lenient on things that I have to do, especially when it comes to my art. Like if I have shows or something, if I come to work a little bit early, I can be able to leave early, so I don't miss art shows and stuff like that. It's kind of hard to see their true colors in here with that big light on, but I absolutely need it to paint. So I was adding a second layer to this arm. You can see where I stopped, like right around the wrist. So I have to add some shadows and highlights to his hand. Um, this hand came out pretty good. I worked on that yesterday. So just a little bit more to go. Alright guys, if y'all new to the stream, definitely follow my Instagram and my Facebook and Twitter and all that shit. Where's my controller? Oh, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Peace. Till next time.